Okay, hi everyone. Thank you very much for joining in one of our many webinars of opportunity funds. I just want to remind you of some of the guidelines that you need to follow for this session. So please remember to remain muted and with your video off. You can type the questions in the chat addressed to Mariana Ocampo, and we will answer them at the end of the session. We will have a Q&A of 10 minutes at the end. This session will be recorded and available on our YouTube channel, Education USA Mexico. We will also send it to you tomorrow, okay? And there are captions available in case you need it. Mariana, can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. Okay, so today's topic is the GRE, the Graduate Record Examination. Tips and resources for 2023, and we have a great guest speaker today. We have Michelle Johansson. She's a coordinator of international education at Delta State University, and this university is in Mississippi State, which is a great university. I have to say, I visited recently a couple of months ago. So Michelle, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Happy to be here.
Thank you. Mariana, can we go to the next slide? Thank you. Okay, so briefly, I would like to introduce what is Education USA for those of you watching us for the first time. So Education USA is a global network of advising centers from the U.S. State Department's Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. Here in Mexico, there's 23 advising centers, and we are 14 advisors that we cover all the country. And we provide free access to introductory information on U.S. studies. Our target audience are students like you guys, higher education institutions, governments, and NGOs. So with no further ado, I would like to welcome Michelle again, and the floor is yours, Michelle. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes, Mariana, can you stop sharing the screen, please, for a second? Because Michelle is gonna share the screen.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
We're gonna start on the same slide.
Great.
Okay. There we go. Okay, so thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here today. And my name is Michelle Johansson, and I work at Delta State University, which is in Cleveland, Mississippi. And today I'll be talking about the Graduate Record Examination General Test. And so I'm going to share some information with you today. If you're already applying to graduate school or even thinking about graduate school, the GRE, which is the exam, can be an important part of your application to graduate school in the United States. And so it's just one part, but it can be a very important part. So I hope you'll find this information useful. So I'll talk about what it is. I will talk about what's new about the GRE that's coming up in September, and then some tips and resources, and then some considerations as you're thinking about where you want to go to school in the United States, what kind of degree programs you're looking at, and such. So, but again, this is just one part of your application. So what I'll be talking about, what is the GRE? What programs, which programs in the United States require and or accept the GRE? What are the different sections of the GRE? What kinds of questions are there on the GRE? How do you take the GRE? What are the options for that? How is the GRE scored? So what does it look like when you get a score report? When will you receive the score? And then also, when will the institutions that you're applying to and that you've selected to receive the scores, when will they get those scores too? So just trying to give some broad information about the GRE for you today. So first of all, what is the GRE general test? It's a standardized test for admission to graduate and some professional programs like master's degree programs, MBA programs, so like business school, JD programs, so law school, and PhD programs. So this is really important. It is a multiple choice computer-based standardized exam. So that's really important there, that it is multiple choice and computer-based. So that makes a big difference when you're taking it. Now, historically, many graduate schools and professional programs required the GRE test scores. However, there has been a number of schools, the number of schools requiring the GRE has actually gone down significantly. It started going down around 2017, but it really accelerated during the pandemic. So I'm going to give you some examples. So for example, in November of last year, in a magazine, it said that their data analysts looked at the majority of STEM PhD programs requiring GRE scores. And they looked at the requirements in 8 different STEM disciplines, so different STEM fields at 50 top-ranked US universities. In November of 2022, so just last year, only 3% of those programs, those schools required the GRE general test scores. In 2018, so 2 years before the pandemic, 84% of those same schools required the GRE. So that's a significant decline in STEM PhD programs that are requiring the GRE. So although the GRE is still popular and some universities require it for some programs, it's really important to make sure that you know whether your program needs it or not. And I'll talk a little bit later about what are the benefits, even if it is optional, what are some of the benefits for taking the GRE in the considerations. What's interesting is that 5% of those top PhD programs in STEM in the US strongly recommended prospective students submit scores. Others made it optional, but 36% of those 50 institutions said that the scores would not be accepted and would not be reviewed as part of the admissions process. So again, make sure that you're doing your research. Actually, on the ETS website, they've got a listing of schools, different kinds of programs, MBA programs, PhD programs, law schools that accept GRE and such. So that's really important to do your research. The other thing that's interesting about the GRE is that there are 2 different kinds of GREs. One is the GRE general test, and that's what I'll talk about. But you may see as you're applying to different programs that they require something called the GRE subject test. And these are content-based exams that test your or show your mastery of a particular field. These fields include mathematics, physics, and psychology. Now, these tests are different than the general test, so I won't talk too much about them. They are offered at limited times during the year. So if you know already that you're applying to a program that requires the GRE subject test, that's really important that you get on the ETS website or you talk to your Education USA advisor, because those tests are only offered at certain times of the year and they're kind of limited. So just make sure that you're doing that and checking with your advisor and the program. So definitely review for the details of that. So that's generally what it is. Now we're going to talk about what kinds of questions are on there that you're going to encounter on the GRE general test. There are 3 different sections of the GRE. So it's really important to know the difference between the different components of the section. First, the analytical writing section. This is also known as the essay section. So this is where you're going to write. And it measures whether you can talk about, whether you can articulate your thoughts and responses to complex ideas in a clear and reasoned way. Okay. You have to be able to formulate a thesis in response to new and maybe unfamiliar topics. And the key to doing well on this is to practice. So I understand that maybe some folks have already started practicing for the GRE and such. Do not skip the essay section in your practice. Even if you're a very good writer and you've gotten high marks in writing before, it is writing under time constraints. It's writing maybe with unfamiliar prompts. So you definitely want to make sure that you practice that. There are two kinds right now. There are two kinds of prompts. One is called analyze an issue. And so that means you will read the opinion on a topic of general interest, and then you're going to get instructions on how to respond to the issue at hand. So again, I'm going to say this a lot. Make sure that you read the directions. So on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see an example, and you can see that there's a prompt there, and then it gives you directions, and it's really important for you to follow the directions. The other kind of example or prompt right now is the analyze an argument prompt, and that's where you'll need to consider an argument according to the instructions given in the prompt. So again, you are reading a prompt and in this section, and then you are analyzing, you're making a thesis, you're writing it out. And so that's really important on that. The verbal reasoning section of the GRE tests your ability to analyze written material as well as relationships between sentences, words, and components. So essentially what this means is you'll have three different kinds of questions. One is reading comprehension, right? You're going to read some passages. The questions are based on the passages, one or more paragraphs in the passages, and then you're going to have to be able to choose with multiple choice the best answers. There's another one. The other two are text completion and sentence equivalence. And you'll have to fill in the blank basically to complete sentences with text completion, and then sentence equivalence. You'll have to fill a blank with two choices that create two sentences that are logically similar to each other in meaning. And what's interesting about this is a lot of times people get intimidated by this. They're like, wait a minute, I have to fill in the blanks and stuff. One of the best ways to practice this is to improve your vocabulary. And a key thing on this is just, again, practice and maybe using flashcards for vocabulary, but then also being able to use context clues as you're reading and practicing. So those are two really big skills that are being tested in the verbal reasoning. And then the last section is the quantitative reasoning. And so the quantitative reasoning is essentially the math part. So, you know, you do not have to have, you know, calculus or anything like that, but it is basic algebra, geometry, and such. And so that's really important for the math part there. So again, three different types, three different sections, and in each section there are a couple of different kinds of test questions. And if this is already worrying you, there's lots of prep, free online prep that I'll talk about, and maybe you're already in a program already, or you've bought a book or something like that. The key is to just practice it, especially the quantitative, because the quantitative is basic arithmetic, which you already know, algebra, geometry, and then data analysis. There's sometimes some charts and tables in there to read. So again, those are really important to work on. And then there's basic problem solving. So those are the different kinds of questions that you'll see. And they're multiple choice, except for the analytical writing, because that's where you're actually going to write it out. Okay, so how do you take the GRE? So like I said, it's computerized, it is multiple choice. So it can be taken a couple of different ways. One is it's available in 160 countries. There are 3 test centers in Mexico City, and then 2 test centers outside of Mexico City. So, but let's say you can't travel. That might not be an option for you. You may have a job, or you may have family commitments, or it's too far for you to travel. The GRE is also available at home 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, which is great. And so you can register for the GRE at home. And sometimes you can even get it for the next 24 hours. And so it can be pretty quick on that. One of the big things, though, is that you need to make sure if you're going to do this at home, that you have the equipment and environment requirements, that you're able to do it at home. Some of the requirements are, and these are outlined on the GRE website at ETS, but some of the things you need to think about as you're deciding, am I going to a test center where everything's basically set up and I just go and show up and show my ID and, you know, take the test, or do I want to try and take it at home? So some of the things you need to think about are, what kind of computer do you have available to you? You cannot use a tablet, you cannot use a Chromebook, and you cannot use your phone or mobile device. You need either a desktop or laptop computer. You also need an approved operating system. So again, you've got to make sure that your software is up to date. You need to use either Chrome or Firefox browser. You cannot have multiple monitors or dual screens. The test security, as well as the just reliability of the test, make it so that they have these rules about equipment and environment. You need to be able to make sure that you can download everything, that your bandwidth, your internet connection is stable. You need a speaker, and you cannot use headsets or earphones. And that's a really big deal because we're so used to having our AirPods in and such, but you cannot do that. You need to be able to hear the proctor who will be proctoring your exam and making sure that test security regulations are followed. You also need a microphone, and it cannot be part of a headset. So again, making sure that you have these items available and ready to go before you take the test is really important. A camera, obviously, because the proctor will need to be able to communicate with you. And here's one of the key things that sometimes people forget about. The camera must be able to be moved to show a 360-degree view of the room. So again, test security measure. So you have to be able to move the camera around the room so that the proctor can see what's happening in the room. You also want to make sure that you're in a private place. You must be alone in the room. Nobody else can enter. So even though it's called taking the test at home, you need to make sure that wherever you are in your home, nobody's walking in the background or opening and shutting doors and stuff like that. So definitely not a park, definitely not an internet cafe, not a restaurant. You want to find a nice, quiet place where you can be alone and nobody's going to disturb you. All of the doors in the room must be closed at all times. You can have nothing on your tabletop if you're doing this at home. No food or drink during the test. You have to sit in a chair. You can't, sit on the couch or anything like that. And the door to the room must be visible to the proctor. And then they also have some regulations on taking notes, how you can take notes if you need to take notes. So again, there's lots of these rules here, and these are all, again, on the ETS website, but it's really important. I think a lot of times people think, oh, I'm going to take it at home. It's just like taking a class at home, an online class at home, where it's okay if your dog jumps on you or barks in the background or your cat jumps on you and stuff, or, somebody comes through the room, but this is very, very different. So just making sure that you have all of that in place there. So once you've successfully completed the test, congratulations, you take a big deep breath. And then of course, your next question is, when am I going to get my score and how is it scored? So it is scored on a scale. And so you can see the different points. So the analytical writing is on 0.5 point increments. So you can get 0, you can get 0.5, all the way up to 6 being the best. And then with the quantitative reasoning and the verbal reasoning, it goes between 130 and 170 in 1 point increments. And so again, these are scaled When you get your scores, they will show you your scaled score, and they'll also show you the percentile that you're in. Oops, there we go. And okay, so when will you get these scores? Right now, if you take the test before September 20th, it takes between 10 and 15 calendar days to get your scores. And so that's what it's standard right now. What'll happen is after you take your test, you will get an unofficial verbal reasoning and quantitative reasoning score immediately after the test. It shows up. But of course, there's the analytical writing that has to be graded by humans. And so that takes a little bit longer. So again, the score that you get right after you take your GRE, wherever you take it, either at the test center or at home, is your unofficial scores for the two sections that are multiple choice and don't require that sort of grading. Then 10 to 15 calendar days later, you will get an email from ETS and saying that your official scores are ready. Also, the institutions that you apply to, so the graduate schools that you said, I would like to have my scores sent to these schools, they will also receive them on the same day that you do. So that's important to know there. Your score report will have your contact information. It'll have your date of birth, your gender, your intended graduate major, your GRE test score and percentile. So, if you scored, 70th percentile in analytical writing, 75th percentile for verbal reasoning, and then 85th percentile for quantitative reasoning, that'll be on that score sheet for you to see. And also on your score sheet, you'll see the last 5 years of scores that you have. So it'll help you kind of compare whether you went up or down. If it's your first time taking the GRE, then obviously it does, that's the only score that will show up. Your institutions that you've designated will receive your scores, and but they will receive similar score sheets with your score, your percentile and such, but they won't know who else you sent the scores to. And also one of the big differences is that they do not receive any of the scores you've chosen not to report. So you can select up to 4 schools to have your test score sent to for free, which is great. If you are applying to more than 4 schools, or you want more than 4 schools to receive your GRE scores, then it's an extra $30 per score report that you send. So after the first 4 free ones. And these scores are good for 5 years. So they are reportable for 5 years. So which is a pretty good deal. So if you decide to change your mind or plans change and stuff like that, your scores are good for 5 years. Okay, so as I showed in the previous slide, it's 10 to 15 days to receive your test scores if you take the test before September 20th, but after September 20th, it's going to be different because the GRE is changing significantly. So for those of you who are out there who have already taken the GRE, just know that if you're planning on taking it again, there is going to be a different GRE, a shorter GRE coming up in September. So that may play into your calculations. If you've never taken the GRE before, this may be helpful for you to decide whether you want to go ahead and take it now or take it after September 22nd. So what's new about the GRE? Okay, so there are different sections. So big changes are coming. First of all, you can see in the charts that I've made, one of the biggest things is that the total test time is shortened almost by half. So it's going from almost 4 hours to just under 2 hours, which makes a huge difference. Whether you're a confident test taker or maybe not so confident test taker, you should know that there's going to be a difference. It is shorter than the GMAT Focus, or the LSAT. So the GMAT is for business school, LSAT is for law school generally. And so the new GRE will be shorter than all of those. So that may play into your decision to whether or not to take the GRE general test. There are going to be 46 fewer questions and the verbal reasoning and quantitative reasoning. So those are the multiple choice questions. There's going to be 46 fewer of them. So you can see that's where a lot of the time is getting reduced. And then there's only one essay. Remember how at the beginning I said that there were 2 kinds of essay prompts? Well, now there will only be one essay prompt in the new GRE. But here are some things to keep in mind. So even though it's shorter, the average time available for each question is about the same. So that's so if you plan on spending 1 to 2 minutes on the previous GRE on a particular type of question, the same will hold through for this as well. And a lot of these test prep software and practice tests help you with that time management. Another big thing is that there is no break in the new GRE starting on September 22nd. So if you look at the bottom table, you can see that there was a 10-minute break, a stretch break that was proctored. Now there is no 10-minute break. So you're going to go all the way through that almost 2 hours straight. The scores will be reported faster. So they're going to come in faster because there are fewer questions or is one less essay. And then the scoring process still remains the same. So it's still on that scale, and you'll still get a scaled score and you will still get a percentile score. But one of the things to remember is that since there are fewer questions and the score scale isn't changing, each question will count more toward the final score. So just keep that in mind. And then the other thing that's not changing is the cost. It is still about $220, depending on which country you're in. China has a different GRE cost, but I believe for Mexico, it will still remain at $220. So take a look at those charts there. You can see that there is a big shift. The GRE, this was announced earlier this year that the GRE was going to be reduced. The amount of time that you'd have to spend testing would be reduced. So that may play into your considerations of whether you take the GRE now or whether you take it after September 22nd. Okay, so some tips and resources here as you're getting ready for the GRE. First of all, utilize your Education USA advising centers, a tremendous resource. Many of you may be doing that already. Make sure that you are taking advantage of every opportunity to learn from your advisor, ask them questions and such. Another thing to think about, a tip or a resource, is to research which graduate schools and programs require GREs and which don't. So that's going to be really important. You can also look if they do require the GRE. Oftentimes they'll have maybe a minimum score that you want to look at and such. But one word about the minimum scores. Sometimes they don't publish those on their websites, or they say there is no minimum score. But also just remember that your GRE is just one part of your application, right? They are looking at you as a person. So it's most places are looking at you holistically. So they're looking at GPA, they're looking at if they require GRE or it's optional, they're looking at that. They are looking at recommendations if they require recommendations. They're looking at your resume or CV. They're looking at your experiences and such. So if you're worried about the GRE because you're not a confident test taker, just remember that it is one part of the application process, and also perhaps your program that you're applying to doesn't even require it at all. So make sure that you are doing your research on that. Whether a school requires the GRE or does not, it does not indicate the quality or caliber of the university. So there are lots of, again, those top 50 universities that I mentioned with the STEM PhD programs at the beginning of my talk. Remember that, dramatically, most of them are not requiring the GRE anymore, or not even looking at the GRE. And those are the top 50 programs. So again, just because a school doesn't require GRE doesn't mean that it's a lower caliber school. It just means that they're not taking that into consideration anymore. You want to utilize free online resources. ETS has lots of resources on there. There are other free resources available as well. You want to make sure that you're looking at a reliable source of information. You want to develop a study plan and a timeline. Again, the new shift is coming with the GRE. So if you're feeling rushed and you're not sure what to do, talk to your advisor, map it out. But create a plan. You should familiarize yourself with the test content and types of questions that you'll encounter. So again, reading comprehension, you may feel really confident about that because of your undergraduate program that you've done, but it's also kind of different when you're in a test environment. So you want to practice those. The practice tests are really helpful because it can help you find your strengths. Maybe quantitative reasoning, you got this, but maybe your analytical writing skills need a little bit of help. So those practice tests can help you. So don't skip any of the sections on the practice test. It can also help you with time management too, because the clock is ticking on these tests and sections. And so you want to make sure that you're doing your best and you've practiced how to handle that pressure. You want to make sure that you're taking notes during your test prep and review them leading up, feel confident. Vocabulary flashcards can help. And then again, the basic things we always want to do before any sort of test or anything like that: get a good night's rest, eat healthy, practice mindfulness, calming techniques, don't panic. Again, this is just one part of your application. It is not the end all be all for you. And then again, I cannot emphasize this enough, check your equipment and environment requirements. How many times have we said, oh yeah, we're going to get on the Zoom, and then Zoom decides to update, as you're trying to get on the Zoom and you're late for maybe a Zoom webinar or a class. So make sure that if you're testing at home, that you've got everything ready to go. So don't assume that everything's going to work perfectly. Make sure that you double check that. Okay. So some other considerations, again, do you need to take the GRE? How will the GRE benefit you? Now, sometimes they will, an institution will say, okay, you don't have to take the GRE, but if you do, you might be eligible for financial aid. Okay, so this is a real life example. At the University of Arkansas, to be eligible for a graduate assistantship in the environmental dynamics program, you must submit your GRE scores. Now you may be like, oh, well, what do I get out of this? It's quite a bit of time for me to study and prep and stuff. Now, this is just at the University of Arkansas. You can get a graduate assistantship stipend, paid tuition, another fellowship, and 66% of your healthcare paid for. So that's looking at over $40,000 right there. So again, if you feel confident in the GRE and your school has this option that you're applying for, maybe this is a good choice for you. If you struggled in undergraduate programs, right? Maybe your first year or second year, you struggled with it. But then you improved as you went along, right? But your GPA is still maybe being held back by those earlier years. Maybe a strong GRE score can help you with your application. So again, you want to check each individual program as well as the graduate school website. You may find a discrepancy. Websites are great for information, but you want to check and make sure if there's a discrepancy. If one website says, oh, this doctoral program doesn't need GRE, but you look on their graduate school general website and it says it does, the best thing to do is contact that program coordinator directly and just ask and just double check. Sometimes for the GRE, it can be waived. If it's a requirement, sometimes it'll say GRE required, or can be waived because of professional work experience or you've already completed a graduate program, so maybe you're going for your second master's degree, and so therefore they're like, you should be fine, you don't need to take the GRE, or you have a high undergraduate grade point average. It depends on the program, so this is why you do a lot of research on their websites, contact program admissions people, talk with Education USA. So other things to consider: do you have enough time to prepare for the GRE? This is a big, if you're committed to it, you want to make sure that you are able to give it your attention, the attention that it deserves, because this is part of your graduate application process. And do your test dates and application deadlines work? So for example, if you're applying for a program and you need to have that score, by October 1st, the September 22nd GRE may not be an option for you. So you may want to take it a little bit earlier. So again, you want to be looking at all of that. And that's it for me as far as the GRE. I'll just share a little bit about my institution, which is Delta State University. And so I'll keep it brief because I know that we have questions that folks have and discussion. So my institution is Delta State University, and we are located in Cleveland, Mississippi. We were founded almost 100 years ago, so we are coming up on our centennial. We have approximately 2,250 students. That was our fall enrollment. We have 42 countries represented. We have several signature programs that our international students are very interested in and complete. So one is commercial aviation. So we are the only aviation program in the state of Mississippi, and you can both pursue an undergraduate and graduate degree with Delta State University. Our undergraduate commercial aviation programs are for logistics management, but then also flight operations, so becoming a pilot. We also have a very strong and very popular international business undergraduate degree and graduate program, so you can get your MBA. We also have digital media arts, which is graphic design, animation, and such. Nursing, we have a School of Nursing. We also have an entertainment industry studies, which is, let's say you want to be in the music business, but you want to be a recording engineer, or you want to work in the business, but you're not necessarily a musician yourself. This is a really interdisciplinary degree that you can get with business and art and music and studio production and such. We do have our own recording studios on campus, which are really fun to hang out in. We also have a geospatial information technologies, both undergraduate and graduate programs. We have an exercise science, both at the undergraduate and graduate level, and then we also have outdoor recreation. We do offer traditional liberal arts as well, history, sociology, education, psychology, speech and hearing pathology, and such. And so those are all really popular as well with our international students. We have traditional and then fully online programs available too, which may be helpful for people who are looking at graduate programs, but are currently in a situation either with work or family commitments where you can't come to the United States. We have fully online degree programs as well. So if you are interested in checking out Delta State University, you can check out our website at the bottom of the page there. We are a small office, but we have 3 full-time dedicated staff for our students. So we strive to make this place a home away from home. And so on this slide, you can see some of the requirements. The top requirements are for everybody. On the left-hand side, you'll see undergraduate. And on the right-hand side, I want to point out that Delta State University does not require the GRE for any programs, graduate programs whatsoever. So that is not an obstacle. We want to make sure that people are coming to us and we're looking at them holistically, their background, their undergraduate strengths, their extracurriculars, their leadership positions, the experiences that they bring, that uniqueness there. So no GRE is required for any of our graduate programs at Delta State. Of course, as international students, it's very important to know the costs of attending the university. So this is for 1 year. It's $23,500, and that includes your tuition, residence hall, room and board. So living in one of our dormitories, various supplies and fees and stuff. So that would be the number that you need for your financial statement. Since this is a mostly graduate audience here, since I'm talking about the GRE, we do have on-campus graduate assistantships, and this is very common at most institutions. And so it can be competitive, which again is why some graduate assistantships, you can become eligible for them if you submit your GRE scores. But it gives you a chance to work for the university in exchange for a tuition stipend and stuff. So again, this is important. You interview, it's a very professional opportunity for students at Delta State University. You know, we have graduate assistants. The last couple of years, I've had international MBA graduate assistants, and they have been fabulous. And it's just been a joy to work with them. So that's a little bit about our institution. Again, you can find us at deltastate.edu/international, and we would be happy to answer your emails, any inquiries that you have about affordability of our programs, some of our signature programs, as you're considering graduate school. So I will stop right there.
Thank you so much, Michelle. That was a great information that you shared with us. I really enjoyed the presentation.
Thank you.
Yes. So I will go with Mariana to see if anyone has any questions, which I see we do have some. So Mariana.
Yeah, Michelle, thank you very much for that presentation. I'm going to be sharing with all of you the questions I received. So the first one is, do we need to select the option of sending our scores to the school before taking the exam, or can we select that after knowing our scores?
So you select the scores, you select the schools when you take the test. So but then you can, so yes, I mean, you can ask for additional scores as well. So what you do is you work through your ETS account and such. And so that's how you can select which schools receive your scores and such. So it is, you know, this is why the research part is really important. That's a really good question. This is why the research part is really important, because you kind of want to know ahead of time, you know, if, you know, what schools need scores, what schools the scores are optional for and stuff, because you certainly don't want to waste one of your free test score reports on a school that doesn't even need your score and does not require your score, and is one of those schools that says we're not even looking or accepting scores. So you definitely don't want to waste one of your free reports on there, because if you're applying to 6 schools, let's say, you want to make sure that the schools that need the scores or require the scores or will help you, the scores may make you eligible for a graduate assistantship or some sort of financial aid. You want to make sure that you prioritize those scores going to those schools first, before, you know, any of the other schools that don't require it. So yeah, that's a really good question.
Michelle, I have a question.
Sure.
What would happen if, for example, this year a student does not get accepted at any institution?
Mm-hmm.
How would he or she send next year the scores, because they are good?
They're reportable for
5 years.
5 years. So you work through your ETS account and stuff.
Okay.
So let's say you take it, I don't know, I take it next month, right? I take it in August. And then I'm like, oh no, I need to save up money, you know, whatever my family situation has changed and stuff. That score is good for 5 years. So then you can send them later and such, but that's through your ETS account and stuff. It's similar to like other sort of standardized tests where you can sort of pick and choose and stuff, but those free scores on your, that you choose those first.
Great. Okay.
Okay, thank you for that answer, Michelle. The next one is, how much time do you suggest to prepare and study for this test? And which are the key study plans that are available? Because there is a ton of information out there and it can be a little bit overwhelming when studying for the GRE test.
I agree. So since Delta State does not offer the GRE, or it does not require the GRE, most of our graduate students are coming in and they have not had to take the GRE. But generally, looking at the GRE, if at all possible, and again, depending on your undergraduate preparation, how comfortable you feel with standardized tests, a computer standardized test, and such, 2 to 3 months, you want to get on a plan so you don't feel rushed. If like, I would not suggest that, people go out and take the GRE for the first time, in 3 weeks or whatever, because, you've got to learn 3 different sections. You've got to learn the different types of test questions. You've got to practice your essays and stuff. Plus you have a life, right? So you want to make sure that you're planning this and you're thoughtful and deliberate about your test preparation, just as with any test preparation. So 2 to 3 months, again, can it be done faster? Maybe, but you want to make sure that you have adequate time to at least take 1 or 2 practice tests. So at least you're familiar with the directions, the kinds of directions that you'll receive in each section, and such. So as far as online resources go, there is a lot of free online stuff there, or it's free to a certain point, and then you pay for the higher level of service and stuff. I would say, talk with your Education USA advisors, because they definitely have more experience with the test prep, and perhaps they have a better sense of what's been helpful for previous students as they practice for the GRE. Certainly everybody is unique when they come to tests, and how confident they feel and how prepared they are beforehand, where they're starting at. So I think working with your Education USA advisor is one of the best things you can do.
That is correct. Michelle, going back to the previous question, somebody's asking that, does it have an extra cost sending the scores like next year or within the time?
That's a good question. I do not know the answer to that. I would think so, because it isn't like an additional score, because you get 4 free every time you take the test, and then it's extra for the extra ones and stuff. So again, I think my guess is being strategic is important. But again, the ETS account is one of your top ways of like the FAQs and stuff. But I would say yes, most likely there is an additional for that, because you get 4 when you pay your $220 for the GRE, you get 4 free scores.
Okay.
And then everything else is extra.
Okay, thank you, Marianita.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. We have another question. Can we send the scores to the schools on our own, or the GRE system must send it to them?
The GRE system, so there's a test code, there's a code for each school. And so, yeah, you have like ETS sends them and stuff. That's for test security. That's the same thing with SATs and ACTs and all of that good stuff. It's, they want to make sure, if you couldn't tell by my explanation of the equipment and security and the cameras and all of that, so no headphones and stuff, it is, it's very high stakes. And so so each school, and if you look at if your school is requiring, that you're applying to is requiring the GRE, then they'll have that code on their website in their application process, and that's how the schools will receive your test scores.
Okay.
So be sure and look for that.
And we have one more.
Sure.
Somebody asked that for the math section,
Mhm.
Is there the possibility to use a calculator while doing it?
Okay, so that's an interesting question about the calculator, because with, like oftentimes with math and stuff like that, you want to like take notes and stuff. So there's an on-screen calculator that you can use for computations and stuff. So yeah, so it's interesting. So they've thought of that, but there is an on-screen calculator. And then if you want to take notes or anything like that, you cannot use it on regular paper. You have to, either you can use like a erasable whiteboard. This was in the test security guidelines, an erasable whiteboard, or you put a sheet of paper inside of a plastic protector, and then you use a dry erase marker or something, and then you have to show that you erased everything and stuff like that. So, but yeah, there is an on-screen calculator, which I thought was really interesting. I mean, that's something that they're thinking of basically everything for you.
Great. Thank you, Michelle, very much. I think we don't have any more questions. Anna, do you want to add anything else?
Well, somebody was asking what GRE will the opportunity funds grantees will take, and it's in person. So if you don't have it in your city, you will have to go to the closest city that offers the GRE, and we will pay for that, going to the city, the bus or well, basically it's a bus, but yeah, it's in-person GRE. Okay, so I think that's the end of the session. Michelle, thank you again so much. It was such a pleasure. See who I have here with me.
Yay!
So this is the mascot of Delta State University, and it's the okra, fighting okra, right?
It is the fighting okra. Yes, it is the fighting okra. So yes.
Oh, and I don't remember if you mentioned it, Michelle, but Delta State has a Grammy museum.
Yes, we do have a Grammy museum. I kept the Delta State part kind of short just because I can, me.
But you
go
need to
on and on.
brag about
So
that.
we do have a Grammy museum. There's one in Los Angeles, and then there's one right on our campus and such. And so that's part of our entertainment industries studies program. So our students work there, they can intern there. And so it's a tremendous resource on our campus. We are very proud of it.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much. And Michelle, we will for sure invite you to one more of our opportunity funds webinar.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Thanks,
Thank you.
guys. We will stop sharing right now. Okay.